Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to the webinar. We're just waiting for people to join. We're on 2 minutes to 2, so we're just waiting for, say, other people to start joining, and we're going to kick off at 2 o'clock prompt. We're most likely going to take us about an hour to get through all of this. We're up to about 70 people joining us, including some of the team there at Bell & Company. So if you need to do whatever you got to do, nip to the loo, grab the coffee, grab the tea, do that. More. Thank you. Cheers.
I've got my water here ready for us. So Terry, just to give you just a wee update, there's currently 20 of us that are online here at the moment.
20 hours, okay, cool. Let's see what that gets. If it takes a little while longer, no, we may go another minute. By the way, everybody, I'm Terry Bell. In the backdrop is my beautiful assistant, Noel, who's head of marketing.
Hello,
and
everyone.
Also in charge of anything that goes wrong here. So any complaints go straight to Noel. We'll give you a backdrop as well. If there are any specific queries you want after this, and not in a sales way in this instance, if there are specific queries afterwards, please come direct. This is quite a personal subject. You know, we're not going to, we've got to, obviously there's going to be massive levels of confidentiality in all of this, but this is a genuine attempt for us to help and advise. But it is a general approach to this, because what did become apparent when we pulled this together was how much is actually involved and made us actually think on about it. And it also came to mind something that sounds a little bit, excuse my French, a bit poncy, but dealing with these things is almost like an art form. There is no set way to do it. Yes, there are processes and systems and approaches to it, but it's still an art form. Every case is different. How are we doing?
So yes, we've currently, there's 30 of us currently on.
If everyone's okay, we'll just give it 1 more minute and then we'll kick off in earnest. Hope all is well with you wherever you are and you're staying safe. Difficult days. Wait for the big speech from Boris to see when we can do and not do things. If you want, in the meantime, in all of this, put a question up, please do. We'll endeavour to get around to it. If we don't, and you want to come back to us, we will cover it. We'll do our best to cover all bases here. But that facility is there available, I believe. Mm-hmm. So let's get rolling here. Okay, so a personal guarantee exposure, obviously with COVID-19 and the way the world is going, we're entering some form of economic decline is the polite phrase. I'm a gentleman of a certain age. I'm 60. I've never seen anything like this at all. It's the world has never stopped turning. There have been crashes, there have been recessions, there's been crazy borrowing, but the world has never stopped, and nobody saw this coming. We believe the economy was struggling, but it was spluttering and farting rather than actually crashing. But this obviously makes it a different world. So that's going to bring out, unfortunately, a lot of personal guarantee exposure across the UK and Ireland. What I'm going to do first, what I would ask you to do, the only thing I want back from you, if you would help us, is our charity that we support. We support the NSPCC. As you're speaking here, D'Amelia in our marketing team is going to ping you just an email, which is the Just Giving page. If you could see your way to support it in a way by donating a £10 say on that, that'd be great. If you don't do it, I won't judge you. Yes, I will. If you can help them, it's a charity that we massively believe in. The stuff that they do on Helpline and Childline, etc., is incredible. And at the moment, the concern is twofold. One, there's a massive funding shortfall, obviously, and the pressure that comes with that. But there's a massive need for this at the moment, where people are trapped in houses. And the worst thing of all of this is the phones that are quieter, which is not a good sign. This. So if you can pay that £10, I'll be incredibly grateful. And one last thing, if you want to find out a bit more about this, Joanne, the lady we work with in Northern Ireland there, Joanne has given us a bit of a commentary there. And also there's a film recently out called Sulphur and White. Bit of a heavy film. It's not very nice. It's in respect to a guy called David Tate, someone that I know quite well now. An incredible man. It's not let's grab a Domino's and watch it after Ant and Dec. It's a bit of a heavy film. It's not, but it's there. It tells a story. So if you can help us, please do. If you can't, you're a miserable sod. Right, moving on, Noel, if you would. So the form of the webinar we're going to take here. Okay, now this has caused me some complication because there's some problems. This because of the style and the nature of the attendees. Okay, so we've got all sorts of professions here. We've got solicitors, we've got some clients, we've got some hopefully potential clients. We have accountants, we have insolvency practitioners, we have banks. And we have other various industries looking in on this. So with that backdrop, it makes it slightly difficult in that we obviously always act for the creditor here. We always act for the client, never act for a bank, but everybody's welcome. So with that backdrop, and I think it would be the only way you could do it anyway, it's going to be almost like a generic overview of where we are. Like I said at the beginning, this is like an art form, right? There are standards you've got to adhere to. There are things and where you've got to work, but it's an art form. So we've cut our teeth pretty well in Northern Ireland. 90% of our inquiries now come from Great Britain. I always have to get those right. And as we go through the paper here, what you'll see is more and more almost like the toxicity of the style of the debt that's coming here. Okay. So with what we're going to present here, well, I'm going to do it in my sort of style, right? Rightly or wrongly. And it's our insight. We're trying to give our insight, okay? And whatever happens, it's got to be, whatever you do here, it's got to be fair and equitable, because that's the only way you're going to get settlements here. If somebody comes to us and says, I'm worth £5 million and I've got £100,000 guarantee, you're paying it. If you're good for it and you've got the cash, etc., you're paying it. There's no point in trying to take chances on here. So we'll be essentially through this talking round the subject. If there are specifics, gladly pick them afterwards and chat away. That's no problem. That doesn't cost. And it's more conceptual, as I say. Towards the end of the paper, we're going to give you a couple of examples, recent works we did, specifically on personal guarantees, and it shows hopefully a bit more tone and form to what we do. And then at the end, we've already got 3 questions in there on the Q&A section. Please do throw anything up there, right? And if we do struggle to get to it or don't answer it as you think, and anybody disagrees, drop me an email, tell me I was crap, and I don't care, big and ugly enough to take anything you got there. But if there is anything specific you want to talk about, please come up, right? I understand this format, this platform, if you like, is tricky in that things are confidential. And we will take any question that comes on. My email address we'll send round to you. You can ask direct if you're asking for a friend. Okay, that's cool. Send that over. No, if you're just trying to set the whole case up, right? I'm not going to open up and tell you how to do the whole thing. But if you've got specific queries on it, that's no problem at all. Please do come to us. So that's going to take the form of it. If we just move on there now, Noel, please. An introduction, okay? No apologies, right? The reason I'm saying no apologies, if I slight a profession here, right, don't take it personally. Okay, if you're offended, and if I use the odd expletive, I'm very sorry. This subject is very emotive, okay, and sometimes I do let myself down, right? But that is down to 2 things. A, I'm very passionate in what I do, and as I always say, it's also part of the fact that I have no breeding at all, no breeding. So the subject is very strong to us. It's debt, which I think most of Great Britain doesn't really understand what's coming here and how horrific this debt issue is going to be. We talk of, not to get too political, about COVID-19 here and the effect it's having on the mental health on people. Wait until this unravels. The SMEs are the real heroes in my mind. Absolutely NHS and the carers, right? But these guys and gals and ladies and gentlemen, everything else, are going to face horrific times if they're under pressure here. Really horrendous pressure. I'm a keen advocate of mental health, but real mental health, if you know what I mean. As somebody said the other day, grandparents saw my grandparents would have seen the Second World War. Okay, so they went through 5 years of hell. Today's generation have been asked to sit on a settee for 2 months. I'm pretty sure we can do this. Okay, this is not going to be very nice going forward, and it gives me no pleasure, genuinely no pleasure, to be able to have to speak about this subject in terms of what's going to happen to our economy and the ensuing mayhem. So, in terms of us, just introducing us, and to say this is not a sales pitch. We know what we do. We're very good at what we do, but it's not a sales pitch. That isn't it. There's not going to be a massive sales pitch at the end, and salesman ringing up every 2 minutes saying, you came to a webinar. If you want to give us business, sure, we'll take it, but it's not a sales pitch, right? So hopefully you either know who we are or you've looked at what we do, and we are debt strategists. We're not insolvency practitioners. I won't slight the insolvency practitioners, but you know who you are. We are debt strategists. We look at that. We're looking for a whole solution. We look at every facet of a case. If we think it's right and appropriate, they should go bankrupt, into a CVA, into liquidation, into an IVA. We will give that advice, but it's whole problem solutions we're looking here, not here's a product here we'd like to sell you. And we develop that strategy, and then most importantly, we implement the strategy. That's the massive thing, implementing it. At some point when we go through this, so there may be some of our accounting friends or legal friends thinking, yes, this is for us, right? You're very welcome to the trade, as it were, but understand the stamina that is required to see this through. That is one of our strong points. And I said quite early, I get quite emotive, and I put a video up yesterday in terms of my favourite deal was when an old lady there in Northern Ireland was getting bullied by an insurance firm, and we won't have that. We won't have it. If our client is wrong, we'll tell them, but we stand steadfast by our clients. We have the stamina, we have the technical knowledge, we have the desire to make sure we achieve. Another small part of our business is we deal with extensively with European property debt, and that's typically when people back in the day went on holiday, got off the plane full of sangria, and bought anything they saw, and that mess is still being sorted. We had a separate consultation the other day with our solicitor in Spain there, and it didn't translate so well, but apparently the Spanish banks are absolutely crapping themselves. Sorry, just a question coming up there, not quite used to the technology. So that's what we do. Yes, if anybody is struggling, we're here. We'll gladly entertain them, and it's whatever way you want to do it. But again, it's not a sales pitch, and we'll move on from there. Right. The press media, who are an absolute bloody disgrace at the moment. I think most people, if you want to depress, watch the 5 o'clock session every evening when the Conservatives roll out somebody and get asked inane questions from the media. Now, economists and experts around the world. I didn't know there were so many experts in the world that understood all about germs, but everyone's got a different opinion. Economists are no different. I read quite extensively, so I try and get a balanced view, and no expert, never purport to be, but I do my research and try and develop my own theories, if you like, based on some experiences and what else is coming there. There is a guy who writes in the Sunday Times, two journalists I quite like in the Sunday Times. One is David Smith, who writes in fairly plain language, and he's actually running a series of jokes on economists. And his latest one was, why do you become an economist? And the answer is because you found accountancy too interesting. David's fairly good, and he's one to follow, I'd suggest, if you get that chance. So we're being taught, we're in recession, massively in recession, and it's where it's going to go. Some people have you believe that we're going towards depression. I'm not sure about the measure of that, but I would think in terms of the level of redundancies that are going to come, as and when Rishi takes off the furlough scheme, could trigger a depression in the true meaning of the word. At no time in history has the economy of the world shut down for 3 months. It's going to bring life-changing attitudes to what's been going on. You saw today, for instance, so the telly still goes, and it should be the most, the easiest thing, the most captive audience you'll ever get would be TV advertising, but that's down 40%. To some of my little wokey team there, my little trendy millenniums, they've got shock horror. Love Island has moved to 2021. We're facing these massive challenges. But when we get back, the world is going to have changed incredibly. Huge industries are failing. You've got airlines. It will never be the same. We will not get a cheap flight again. It just cannot be. You know, I'll repeat it. It's no joy in talking about this, but it's almost like a correction in terms of the way the world was going. The cruise liners, again in Belfast, in the summer there are 140 cruises. The economy will lose 140 ships full of 5,000 tourists. It's horrendous. It's amazing. Then suddenly, if we go back onto what the slide is saying, we've got yesterday the four big banks. Sorry, I have to always take a deep breath. I'm going to say the word bank, are providing for £50 billion of bad debts in Q1 only of 2020. 50 billion. RBS, for goodness sake, cost 72 billion to bail out, 50 billion in a quarter. Yes, 10 times, it's 10 years on, but it's still, it shows the enormity of what's going on here. Rishi's thrown 330 billion at civils. Horror stories just abound, to say. So it's recession. We know the industries that are going to be massively hit. Retail shot, leisure, hospitality shot. The number of inquiries we get from gymming companies is incredible. Gold's Gym yesterday in America, that's closed. Construction, that's one that the government are fighting very hard. And I see I was talking to a client there who's heavily into assets capital. They've just come on to the civils panel. Now that saved my client's backside. He was into them for a good lump, and yes, he knows he's going to take a correction on his prices, but they're looking almost like to encourage. I think they'll have to encourage infrastructure work, and also they're going to have to support the building industry through this. They've got to try and look after property. It will take a correction. The thing that is becoming apparent was a quote from Warren Buffett, which he made in the 2008 crash, and that was that when the tide goes out, you find out who's wearing the swimwear. Okay, at the moment, it would appear that Richard Branson has his budget smugglers on. For a man who's worth $5 billion, it's not slighting Richard Branson. It's what has happened in terms of this amazing change around in terms of the economy. A man that on paper was worth £5 billion at the beginning of this year has lost a business, badly needs support in looking after Virgin Atlantic, was going to look after Flybe, a bit close to my heart, that one, because I used to use them quite a bit. And we start to find out about things. There's Ferrero Tata in America, owns a massive football team out there, the Houston, whatever they're called, 800 restaurants, 48,000 staff, burning cash at 10 million a day. Can't go on. And the situation where we are at the moment comes back to a comment we once got when we first started doing our work in Spain. And it's known as the Spanish property falling nightmare. Cheers. And what that is, we were explained to our solicitor. She once said that, when you have a dream, when you fall, as you fall, you don't make any noise for a while, and then you start screaming, and then you wake up. At the moment, we're not even screaming. We've just fallen. So it's not going to be nice. It's not to be depressing in any way, but it's reality. It's going to be bad. So very quickly, our opinion, right? This is my opinion. So if anybody wants to sue us, it's me that said it. Okay. I think obviously this year is going to be horrendous. I think next year is going to be worse. And I think that's when the personal guarantees particularly are going to come out the woodwork, which we'll come to in a minute. And I believe that 2022 will come round a bit, and hopefully we can start to come through there. But there's a good 18 months of nightmare, and it's how it pans from there. also subject to the way the disease conducts itself, and so many outside features. 4 years ago, we did a tour around Belfast, 5 years doing various breakfasts, and we were saying how mad the world was then, and we put up an image of Donald Trump. At that point, he was 4-1 to be president, which was at that time crazy. So we still got the Donald factor to build in. As is where we are at the minute. Then coming back to the PG on the main theme here. Sorry for transgressing there. Luke Johnson, again, another great writer in the Sunday Times, great writer, great businessman, say it was on his watch that patisserie Valerie failed because he took his eye off the ball. But he wrote in his column there in the Sunday Times that companies that had, using the vernacular of COVID-19, companies that had a pre-existing condition when the world stopped have had it. They will not survive this. They cannot survive this. So if you had a retail unit that was struggling and you were trying to get it through this, that isn't going to happen. Over and above that, we're going to have good businesses, good businesswomen and men. They're unfortunately going to fail as well here. And the Ireland was bad, and Great Britain got it bad in 2008. This is going to be really bad here, and personal guarantees form a lot of the security here. And it's the unraveling of this nightmare is going to be really difficult. Right. On our next slide, I say that personal guarantees are evil, right? They're evil in that we thought they were safe. We thought there was nothing to it. We thought it was a bit of paper, and it can be the most toxic piece of security you can ever have. You could have your premises, you could have an investment property secured to the bank, you could have debentures to your bank. It's not good. It's not good. And the personal guarantee was tucked around. It's something that we signed maybe years ago, maybe a decade ago, further, that said, yeah, if this goes wrong, don't worry, I'll stand in. And that was simply the basis that it was dealt with. And personal guarantees just become quite ugly. And they can usually, a lot of this ugliness stems and comes from the creditor's perception on somebody's wealth or otherwise. And it's very careful that we have to keep it in a bit of context. And it's crazy. You're trying to do things on an economic basis, but very often you're trying to break people's perceptions, be it a solicitor, be it a court, be it a bank, whoever who has the guarantee. And sometimes very often common sense doesn't prevail. Some organisations, and I won't name organisations, Zurich, just take the view that if you can't meet the liability, we'll bankrupt you and see how it pans out. So it's again, I'll repeat myself, it's like an art form. And I've put here yin and yang. There's two mindsets. So if we're acting for a client, on one side, we're against a bank, a trade supplier, whoever on the other side, okay? So there are two stances. If we understand fully, if the creditor is taking a loss, they're going to rely entirely on their security, okay? And we have to go through the creditors have to go through the process of issuing demands, appointing their solicitors and everything else, okay? And it's very often we forget the economic argument. We get into legals. So from our perspective, we're trying to say, right, our client, either we question some issue on your guarantee or our client's not good for this. And then it's trying to relay those full messages across. And it's difficult. So there are two camps. So I'm not going to go and say, right, this is what we do. That's what we do in this situation. That's not the form of this. But we're fully aware if somebody owes a debt, they sometimes get people come and say, right, I signed a personal guarantee, but I simply don't owe them the money. I go, show us the guarantee. It says clearly you owe the money. We're not that stupid, but we've got to look at the case. If a client is eminently good for it, the next job is to try and keep the costs within control. So we're not looking for full-on punch-ups every time. If somebody wants to have a bit of an argument, we'll have that argument, and whatever happens, like I say, we won't let our clients be bullied in these issues. But there is that yin and yang. You're looking from two sides. Now, the next point I make there, personal guarantees as a form of security. stating the bloody obvious, but this is a form of security. Typically, when you go back and find out the original letter offer here, the security may consist of, like I said, a charge on the factory or the shop or whatever, a debenture, whatever else it may be, and then the personal guarantee dated on a certain thing here. Typically, if that is the scenario, and that's the old world, which we'll come to in a minute, we will work down through that list. Okay, so we're saying, right, okay, so we'll sell the factory, refinance the factory, realize whatever we can. If the debenture, if the company's got to be liquidated, then that's got to be put in the hands of a insolvency practitioner. They'll do their work, and if there's some funds, that will go to the bank. Then you're going to the next stage where you come down to the PG. Okay, and I'd suggest at the moment, in general, in light of the sort of flux of particularly the banking profession, to be ready for this, or been pretty good for, say, 8 years, and don't have. Okay, when you look at a number of the finance agreements that we come across, that the personal guarantee was signed as part of the sales process. So if there's a client there that we have in England, there in Shropshire, he has a couple of $100,000 on a load of digger equipment, and the personal guarantee was signed after the sales invoice. Sorry, there was a sales invoice, then there was the HP agreement, there was a personal guarantee, not quite as tight as it should be. So what I'm saying is, overall, if I was a bank, if I was a solicitor acting for them, I'd be asking everybody, my clients, to go and get all their forms, get where we are with them. This isn't going to be a case of just throwing them out saying, yeah, you're good for you're liable for this. It has to be done in such a way that things have to be in order here. I know there will be many instances where there won't. So as I said, there are different agendas in here, and you're either chasing or you're defending. We're defenders. Our clients are being chased, so it's a massive differential, but we carry on in terms of what we're talking about here. Validity is what it's all about. We do have to question validity of most personal guarantees. So it's, again, very important that we see the personal guarantee. We need the context of the guarantee. We need advice from the solicitor who gave Touchwood the separate independent legal advice. If it's say husband and wife who sign guarantees, the validity is absolutely massive in this. An example we come to later is, and it's slightly tenuous, but our client did not recall, and he's a genuine man. He's a man of some means. He wouldn't, he could have written a check out, but he said he definitely didn't remember signing a guarantee. So we put that to the bank, and this loan had then been sold on, and it's diluted almost like their effectiveness to chase it. They paid not a lot for it. They did quite well out of the settlement we did, I think. But the validity of a guarantee is what it's all about. Very quickly, when we come to the legals in a little bit, the legal profession in the main seems to be quite keen on calling on a demand and then issuing a stat demand straight away. And very quickly, I think this could block up quite a few courts, because they're not liquidated sums. If I'm wrong on this, please do email me. I'm sure you will. But it's your strength of your case or otherwise, be it either side, be it the yin or the yang. So validity is absolutely key. A quick word on joint and several, which whilst I say that personal guarantees are evil, joint and several guarantees are a disaster, because I sat down with it's actually a friend of mine now. I sat down, so there was an imbalance in the joint and several setup. So one man was good for it, another man wasn't. And the guy that I knew was the guy that wasn't. He was good for some of it, but nowhere near the sort of level we're talking. And it, quite understandably, it got a bit ugly, because one man had to pay out, say, 75% of the settlement, and the other guy paid 25%. And there was a massive fallout, and small community, and everything else. It was a mess. Michael, why did you go into a joint several? What possessed you? He said, well, when you start off into business and you go in there, right, you don't think about saying, how should we dissolve the business if we fall out? I said, well, why would you sign the personal guarantee? He said, well, you just don't do that at the start. He said, it's a bit like going on a first date and saying, right, hello, you're very nice. Can we talk about divorce? You don't do it. It's all, you know, your heads are in the clouds. Let's go on. We can beat the world here. So it was that sort of summed it up. Now, a couple of FAQs, which are, and they're almost like, I mean, if I offend somebody, I apologize. Some of these are the simple things that come up, right, that we ask, okay? That we're asked, right? I've signed it, but I don't think, you know, and it's just crazy stuff. Like, my wife signed it, so she's not liable, is she? The other ones are, the bank manager said he'd never call on this. He said, sign it so that I can get my facility. I had to sign the lease for my daughter because she wasn't going to get the shop. So surely I'm not responsible for it all. You're an element of the security in each and every instance if the validity of the guarantee is there. But it's almost like people, and again, it's that thing where it's going to be in Britain, it's going to be Great Britain, it's going to be the shock of these things coming back out. Over that eight-year period where sort of we flourished a bit, you've suddenly got the situation where asset values are up, and that causes issues, not least in our creditors' perceptions. If we got a house that was worth 700 grand 6 years ago, it's now worth £1 million, and we've got 500 mortgage, we're exposed. We got 500 grand of cash in their eyes. It doesn't get 500 cash, but that's the perception issue that we have. So that's why they're evil, because it's something we've almost forgot. It's something we don't really want to think about, but it's there and it will really turn on us. One for our insolvency practice, a bit like you guys. Take money, you're their new best mates when they come on board, and then they acting for the creditors. So moving on, this is the world today. This is the problem that we really do have here. Okay, and old world versus new world. Okay, so as I said there, I'm a gentleman of a certain age, still a child, but a man of a certain age. And in the old world, usually it was a situation you had a conventional bank loan, and you may have had a lease on the factory, the shop, the office, wherever. Okay, and that used to be about the extent of it. You did all your HP through the same bank, you did all your invoice discounting through the same bank, etc., etc. Life was relatively simple. And it was, again, the 2008 crash, most of that stemmed along those lines. So you had the situation where if it did go wrong, you'd be speaking to the bank or the solicitors. If it did go wrong, the lease was called on, you were speaking to the landlord and trying to work something out, get new people into the premises and everything else now. Now, in terms of where that is, just on the old world where that is now, you've now got the situation where conventional banks aren't as prevalent in the market today. They left the market en masse in 2008, which brought in the new world, which we'll go to in a minute. So there is still the exposure, obviously. There's still that's going on, but that's almost that's conventional in every sense. Leases are going to be trickier now to try and resolve because you're exposed until the end of whatever you signed. And if you signed a 25-year FRI lease, good old school lease, the sort that Mike Ashley and the like are trying to get out of now, you're in for the term of that lease until it's let otherwise. You're still responsible for it, even if it does get sublet, if that subtenant then consequently fails, if you've got PG exposure there. So I was walking around, I live in Harrogate here, quite a nice town, market down, good shopping centre, and I'm amazed when I walk around the town every now and again, getting my one bit of exercise, Boris only, is you're seeing shops not just closing, being stripped. When LK Bennett, Jules, Jewelers, Ernst Young, clear the shelves and the racking, they're gone. So trying to get those relet along the way is going to be tough. So that's the old world. Our big problem is, right, I should have put this slide slightly different, right? New world PGs are a toxic mix, okay? Because we have a mix now, okay? And a couple of examples. So we have the fintechs. We have Starling in the world. We have Monzo's, not overly entering into the lending market too much, but there are any number of platforms here. We were with a guy once, and he was in all sorts of trouble. And in the term of the meeting, his phone kept clicking, and he was being sold 25. He was in what we technically call the brown and smelly. He was being sold hard sale, 25 grand low, which he took there and then. So the fintechs have sprung primarily out of the availability of cash from the last lot of QE, which flooded the market. You've got any number of property platforms, and when they go wrong, they go wrong. We've got a couple of clients there who are stuck in the Lendy platform, and we've been dealing with RSM, the liquidators there, and it takes some unraveling, trying to see what's going on there. You've got a far more competitive asset finance market. They are very aggressive in their approach, very aggressive. And if you've got I'm not going to name names here, but if you've got one of the smaller houses on it, be careful. Just keep an eye on yourself with those. Okay, P2P loans, right? A little bit of a bugbear at the minute. Okay, the levels of due diligence. I'll put it up there. I don't care if they come back at us. Right, we're having a proper argument funding circle the way they're conducting themselves at the moment, and I was disappointed, not in a commercial sense, but in terms of their appointment on the Sybil's thing there, because they have a broken business model. They've undoubtedly not undertaken their due diligence correctly, rely solely on personal guarantees. And now when things are starting to go wrong, they're pushing straight for charges on homes. And they're not prepared, as are most fintechs and asset finance companies, for the vagaries of the legal process. Funding Circle's way is just to issue, pay 10 grand into court and get a counter court summons. That should sort it. So they're not ready, and it's ugly. Trade suppliers are becoming more and more aggressive in terms of, first off, their requirement for PGs. So when they get to a certain size, they look to insure their debt, and then the insurers or the invoice discounters and factors, they will look for a PG. Because they take that view, and some of the builders merchants boys are brutal and ugly as well. Not too pliable, not too realistic, because I think it's almost like they don't want to be seen to be weak. So that's the tough area. And then you're getting now on the back of it, and I know a guy that does this. Really hard to unravel, and trying to get everybody to join in there. So we've got a case there which I put an EG. There's a tech company there with P2P and other facilities, and in total there are 15 lenders, all with joint several PGs, and there are 3 directors involved. And then I've also put in there the nuclear bomb, if you like, on there. It's called technically D&D, which is the absolute disaster in all this. It involves debt and divorce. So it's going to be a shocker. Most likely, unfortunately, end up in bankruptcy, because it'll be an easier thing to unravel. When we talk like that and say we're going to bankruptcy, it sounds almost like a bit blasé. It's what we do. It's almost like, I don't know, an undertaker measuring up 6'3" box by 4 foot. It's not always the worst thing in the world, but debt and divorce are very, very difficult. We have a 3D as well. That's like anecdote. We meet once a year in Spain with Mr. 3D, the delinquent debt director for Sabadell Bank in Sevilla. He's they again totally out of this remit, but they've huge problems there. So old world, new world. New world is going to be hard work here to unravel. And if you've got a bit of old world as well, you're almost like creating a full house there. So that's how we see that going. That's what we're coming across now. So moving on to, if a PG is called upon, and the B word, right? The B word is bankruptcy. Elephant in the room. People don't like to hear it. It's the backdrop to anything that's going on in the insolvency world. And you need, if you're under threat, don't be afraid of it, because creditors can smell fear. If somebody comes into us, then go, whatever happens, I can't go bankrupt. Why can't I go bankrupt? I can't go bankrupt. I can't go bankrupt because the social stigma, you know, what will people think, my job, da-di-da-di-da. That's it. Okay, well, you need to pay it in full, or you might have to pay 100 grand. Bankruptcy holds no threats to us because you're dealing with people's perceptions, as I said. So as soon as this kicks off and the demand comes in from on the PG, we're under threat, and we would have already done this, but it's a case of getting the full due diligence done. That's going to involve copies of the personal guarantee, the loan, any other documentation that's come through, and some I'm going to mention at the end of this slide, the SAR. So you're under threat. Here they come, right? So you are now working essentially in an insolvent atmosphere. You are definitely don't go start ramming up the credit cards and taking loans out. And if I'm going down, I may as well go down a big way. Not big, not clever, and it will end up going wrong on that side should you go bankrupt. So if you look at the next point I make there, it's about the two things in bankruptcy that the official receiver or trustee can go after are assets and income. Income, if you're going to keep your job in bankruptcy and you're earning huge amounts of money, you'll be subject to what's called an income protection order. But typically, they're aiming at the assets here. What's your home? What's your business? What are the others? Okay. When I get to another slide in a minute, saying there's a bit of a checklist, those are things you've got to look at. In terms of home, is it in the sole husband's name when it should be in the joint names? Is it correctly valued? Did we ever sort out that legal dispute? Things like that. Businesses are looked at in a fairly academic way in terms of let's get the last set of accounts and look at the net asset value, right? That may have intangible assets, that may have stock in there to suit whatever argument it was at the time. So it's a case of just getting those checked out. And as I said, these form the basis then of the person's perceptions. And breaking those is not easy. If they house is worth £1 million and you've got £700,000 of equity and your business is worth £1 million and you've other paintings that are worth 300 grand, you're £2 million, you're worth £2 million. Breaking that down is very difficult, especially if the man or lady that's involved in terms of the PG holder, they help write the business because he's a good man, they've got a great home, it's a fantastic business, she's a great woman, she's got all the art collections, she's got great properties. It's difficult to break down. So it's very important that you start getting our shop in order here. So going back, if you're under threat, don't wait for that threat to accelerate, or a client is, bring it through here and look at your own due diligence. Where are you? Okay. You can, we always ask for we go for what's called a subject access request. We want that file. How did that personal guarantee come across? We're dealing with a case at the minute where a bank can't find the file. There's a farm under threat and they can't find a personal guarantee that apparently the good lady wife signed. She genuinely doesn't have any recollection of this. She signed loan documents for the limited company. And it's a case of when you get the subject access request, if that is struggling to come up with necessary information, then that's part of our negotiation process from there. Subject access request is available because of the provisions of Data Protection Act. So PG called upon and the B word. Okay, legals. Now I'm going to speak in round terms here, and if I'm wrong at any point, I'm sure I'll get told, but this is how we work. Legals. So the kickoff at any point, if there's a demand, equals a position of insolvency. Be ready because it's happening. Okay, so we kick off. There has to be a demand letter. There was a recent case law where a company pushed for a statutory demand, but hadn't issued. They'd asked for the PG, but hadn't actually issued a demand letter, so they had to start again. So a demand letter will very often come from the institution involved. That will pretty quickly. So please pay £300,000 under the cover of your PG. That will quickly escalate to a solicitor's letter. Rarely do they go down the route of CCJ. The current vogue seems to be, let's go for a statutory demand here. And that is the precursor to bankruptcy if you don't deal with the statutory demand. I'm not going to go on about that because that's quite complicated. And I don't want to, if you get a Stat Demand Act, speak to somebody who knows what they're talking about and go to the right advisor. Don't go to the man or woman who was very nice and did the conveyance on your house. Okay. You need if you want to go to a barrister, do whatever. I use a phrase later, Rolls Royce and Mini, right? It's a bit big-headed about us. We're only good at one thing. We negotiate debt. If somebody comes with a tax problem, I've no idea what you're talking about. Go and see this man who's quite good. So that's typically the process that's going to go on. All of this is the backdrop you're working to then to negotiate some form of settlement. And you're working under, there's a point I've raised there, the legal backdrop where there is the threat and the focus is needed by everybody now. We're not, niceties are over, we're coming for you, we want some money and we're going to squeeze the pips here, okay? Don't fall out with my legal friends, please. The carriage of if a carriage in its entirety goes to the case of to a solicitor, sometimes it concerns me. Sometimes that becomes their own agenda, okay? And I'll be a bit disparaging. Sometimes the opportunity to generate fees here overcomes the desire to settle the matter for the creditor. Very rarely, but we're not afraid to do it, we will go direct to the creditor, which totally, excuse my French, pisses off the legal profession. But if we don't think that the solicitors conduct themselves right, we will go to the creditor. If they say, bugger off, go and speak to the solicitor, it takes us back a step or two, but let's be sure here, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to maximise what we can for the creditor. From our angle, we've got to try and give a cheeky bid, but we know that the creditor's still trying to maximise what he can from here. So the legal start, be ready. You've got to fight like crazy, and then you've got to be ready to pay. If you think you're going to get away with nothing, think again, right? And if you think if you're worth £1 million and you're going to be able to not pay 100 grand of a guarantee you owe, crazy. But so you've got to be ready to pay, which is a problem in itself in the way the world is now going. So if you look at specific issues now, which we've got on our next slide, I think my beautiful assistant's fallen asleep this year. Nope. The specific issues as at this point now, okay, there is going to be a time lag on demand, okay. We've got to get back. Boris is going to tell us on Sunday how we can get back to work. There's going to be that stage back to the Spanish nightmare where there's not going to be any noise for a while. There are a couple of suspensions in terms of certain types of legal action that can be taken. I think Boris and most people are going to say, let's all be nice for a while. And then there's going to be a slight delay. And then I think we're all going to become quite feral. The courts have a bit of a backlog. We'll see how they deal with that or otherwise. We are going to face a litigation frenzy. The Americans are already going nuts for it. You've got litigation funds gathering up money now to be able to support any number of cases that are going to be going on there. And I think the courts are going to struggle for a while, but we'll see how that goes. And then what are we going to be like afterwards, after lockdown? Some people go, I don't give a monkeys. Our attitude is going to change across the board. It's a strange thing that nobody knows how that's going to work out. Further down the road, there'll be a lot of NPLs, non-performing loans, and debt, which could lead to loan sales, and then we'll start getting the services of the world rearing their heads because they're the three-headed dog, and they will start to take a different approach again. But that's a longer-term process down the road. I think a huge issue in the immediate future is going to be raising funds. You may have your £500 million house with your £500,000 mortgage and look like you're worth 500,000, but if there's not going to be available money in the short term, if you've got a potential hit on the asset value, if there's a correction of property, say 15 to 20%, that there's that issue. There's they've bunkered in mortgage lenders down to about 60% loan to value, and then there's going to be the tightened criteria. It's quite rightly so after 2008, but incomes are going to suffer in this undoubtedly. So banks will look for a bit more protection. Rishi may promote and say, right, guys, we've got to loosen up a bit here. But as with the Sybils and the bounce back and whatever else is going to call one next week, banks still want reassurance that they're not going to get caught here. And it's the raising funds is going to be a massive thing here. If you've got a personal guarantee, my recommendation to you is go and say, how can I gather up if I need to deal with this? We had a guy there that was getting helped out in London there. He's got a guarantee of 2.5 million, been going on forever and a day with Bank of Ireland. It's been sold onto a loan, had it set up. We had a man who was going to offer 150,000 to get rid of it. That man's business has collapsed overnight because of COVID-19. So my senior partner, a good accountant in London, his phrase was that cash is the eighth wonder of the world. Go back in the old days, Robert Maxwell had cash. It wasn't his, but he had cash flow. It's going to be a massive thing. So if you've got a personal guarantee, think how you could gather up here. It's very, very different. We've got a number of cases that are stalled who may fail now because of their inability now to be able to get their hands on anything. So we've got to watch this space on that one for sure. I'm going to end on a couple of examples here that we've gone, which we can I'll wrestle through quite quickly because there's a couple of questions lined up there. One is one that we settled last week with a UK bank there. The PG was sold on. It was joint and several. Perfect yin and yang in this one. Favourite phrase at the moment. One party of incredible value. The other party didn't have a pot to pee in. That's cool. Our man with money had no problem with that. The vogue was then to issue stat demands. Let's shake everybody down. That the loan, like I said, the loan was sold. The statutory demand wasn't brilliantly prepared. It looked like a bit of a cut and paste job, and let's change the numbers. That got so we issued an application of that set aside, which it was. There are a number of issues in the SAR which create mini battles for us. It won't win the war, but it created mini battles. And we got to that we would offer. We were authorised to offer 125,000 to sort this out. So we got to the stage where we're talking to the decision maker, which isn't easy, but we got to the decision maker and say, right, it's as simple as this now. You can either take the 125 or we're going to lodge it with our solicitors and we're going to fancy our chances here in terms of any legal action you want to take. The effect of that essentially is saying, right, we're putting 125,000 down. If we win this, okay, you're not making 125,000, you're making a 250,000 pound judgment call. In that you won't get our 125 and it's going to cost you 125, which you'll have to pay us. That didn't happen quickly. That took 18 months of pretty tough negotiation. We couldn't provide finances for our clients. We weren't required to in this instance because it was a slight difference to our usual carry. The second example is somebody I was speaking to this morning because we just sorted out his last debt in this. And this was a 750,000 guarantee, mainly conventional type lending, as I called it, old world lending there. The net value of his, we politely call it debacle, was still 400 plus. We were fortunate enough that the solicitor in this case, they issued the stat demand. We went to the solicitor and said, we can get you something, but we can't get you 700, 750, and with other creditors. Okay, so we can't prefer anybody here. So they quite reasonably said that we could discuss the matter with their creditor. And we pointed out to them that in the event of bankruptcy, because in the event of bankruptcy, obviously values get hit, the amount of the loans fly up, and liquidator will be appointed. He will charge his fees, and et cetera, et cetera. And we estimated that they would only get about 40,000 out of this at the end of all of it. We got to a situation where we settled on 60,000, and then the other 300,000 pounds of creditors didn't give in, but they followed this line. If the major creditor is doing it, it gives us a chance to say, look, the big boys are taking it. We think you should take it. If you don't want to take it, don't take it. You'll get your share out of bankruptcy at some point. Again, it took 24 months to resolve. I'm just going to leave you before we look at Q&As on the conclusion there. It's a bloody minefield, okay? Weirdly, it's exciting because it's what we do. And it's exciting. It's massively unknown what's going to happen, and there is so much involved. You know, I think about 4 times, it's like an art form. You don't know where it's going in a case. You can have your form and you think it's just going to go along this. It doesn't, right? I hate these cliches. Unprecedented times, and we're on a journey. And one instance they apply. Everybody's saying it. If Robert Preston again says unprecedented times, I think I'll put my foot through the telly. Backdrop of that is we are in a bad place. We don't know how this is going to pan out. Banks don't know. Nobody knows. You must prepare, if you're under some threat on the PG, you must prepare your checklist, get yourself in order. On matrimonial home, right? You may think it's jointly owned, but if it's in the name of the husband, it's harder to claim afterwards the good lady's or whoever partner's rights in that property. Get your house in order, literally, and it requires massive fight and stamina. And I put PwC in. I don't mind slighting them. We had a client, he was coming to us. He didn't think we were up to it. He preferred the big four guys to the PwCs of the world to make representations on a £5 million debt. Our fees were quoted. PwC said they'd do it for 10 grand. They issued a beautiful looking report, 40 pages long. Oh, it's beautiful. Lovely piece of work. Could have sat on the coffee table. Not worth the paper it was written on. The bank said no. PwC's approach was shrug their shoulders. They said, no, what do we do? They're never going to say yes to whatever you put to them. So it's the fight that carries on. It's the continual fight. And the last point I make there, and slightly mixing up the agenda here, it's not a hobby. If you as an accountant are thinking of undertaking this, make sure you do have the time to commit to this, because it's full on. It's not, oh, bloody hellfire, this is going to be hard work here. It's not easy. It can be scary. And to quote Alex Ferguson, there will be squeaky bum time in it. It's never runs any straight path. You can think something's nearly home. We've done negotiations with banks and they've changed their mind over the weekend. It's nuts. It's not a hobby. Okay, you get what you pay for. If you want a tax expert, go to tax expert. If you want good debt advice, small sales pitch, come to us. It's what we do day in, day out. It's going to be ugly. You can all deal with it. We never sit there and go, could you run over that 5 times? I have no idea what you're talking about. So let me just do a quick bit of Q&A, if I may, right? Okay, we have a wife who signed a personal guarantee. Is she liable? I have to speak around some of these, okay? And so the situation there is, if it's been correctly undertaken, performed, executed, then she will be. What is my exposure on a property lease with a signed personal guarantee? I assume in that instance, that person has the personal guarantee. They will go at the first person that's on the lease or the company. If you are supplementary security in the form of a PG, yes, you're exposed. You're exposed for the term of that lease until it is re-let. If there's a shortfall on there, you're still responsible for the full term and the full rental, less any deductions for somebody that may pay rent, but you're for the life of that lease. On that, a PG, by the way, it's very hard to ask for a PG back, and it's very hard to deal with PGs in death. If the very fact you ask for it back suggests that there is a problem. I have another question here that says, I've signed multiple personal guarantees. One of the lenders being really aggressive. They said, I want to put a charge of ours. Yeah, they will push for that, right? They are preferring their position, but it's that is available to them to open up the ability to put the charge on that property. Something that's going to become more and more prevalent. Back to the feral society, I expect, in 6 to 9 months. If the courts are clogged up, is there a better chance, possibly better terms, 58% structural repayment? Absolutely. It's almost like using the system. In Northern Ireland, for instance, there's talk of the courts not opening till September. Okay, so with that backdrop, we're chatting away. And there is still, going back to what I was saying there, if the legals start and the court is part of the process where everybody's talking about it in there, if somebody gets a stat demand and then they issue a petition, you're still negotiating right up to the date of that petition. So there's always a time to negotiate, no matter where you are in the process, be it clogged courts, be it bankruptcy petitions, etc. Is HMRC debt secured or unsecured? Now, this is dependent on if it's limited company debt, and it's very important to get that limited company debt because some organisations go from partnerships or sole traders into limited companies and forget to change their VAT number and registration, so they become personally liable. Limited company debts are completely limited company debts. Individual debts are completely individual debts. Unsecured at the moment, although the VAT, PAYE are looking to secure, not secure, sorry, wrong phrase completely, are looking to get to a situation they become the preferred creditor in this again, as it used to be in the old days. Not necessarily relevant to you as an individual if you're going bust, but in terms of the priority of the creditors. Next question, will the HMRC accept a negotiated amount without going through insolvency process? Very rarely is the answer. I have had many an argument with the insolvency service, the HMRC, in terms of achieving the best deal for the Chancellor, who is ultimately their boss. If you have any history, or as they like to call people, serial offenders in terms of payment, you've little or no chance. If somebody, I'll put down, I'll say the initials GG, if you want to send me a little bit more detail on that, I'd be able to give you a bit more of an insight. Okay, is it only you can either, what other countries do you cover business in trouble? Within reason, we can cover anywhere. We have clients, we dealt with clients who had properties in New Zealand. Within reason, it's the same principle. It depends as well, the person that sent me this email, if it's a foreign bank and they're still covered in terms of their available, say there's a treaty with the UK in statute that says we will, it's a bit like the US, sometimes we'll send out guys there to be tried and locked up and everything else. Depends on the country, depends on the nature of the debt, depends where you are as a person. If you're a UK resident, they've still got to come here and come and get you. And that's part of our EU property solutions and what we do there. So that person there, initials EC, again, if you want to ping me an email, my email address is as per the website, so it's tb@belcomp.co.uk. You're very welcome to ping any queries like that, no problem at all. If anything comes to you after this, you'll have the misfortune of being sent this slide, this PowerPoint. And if things do come up, you're very welcome to chat away with us. That's what it's about. We're trying, obviously it's a PR thing we're doing, but it's not an out and out sale. Hopefully what we have managed to get across is the complexities of what you face in personal guarantees. You know, I want everyone, I genuinely like success. I'm not sitting there rubbing my hands going, this is going to be great. I had a very nice farmer in Donegal the other day. His words were, Jesus, you're going to be busy, you bastard. So I think it was praise, but you may have suggested otherwise. It's what we do. If anybody wants to help, please do. I would hope that everybody stays safe genuinely through what's going on here, gets back to work as soon as they can, and can drive through these difficult times that are coming through. People aren't weak. We're not naturally weak. We're strong people. So everybody, just keep going, whatever you've got to do here. Make sure when you're doing things, you surround yourself with positive people, right? Get rid of negativity and get rid of negative people. Sounds harsh here, right? And I will use a swear here, even if it's fucking family. Get them out of your head. This is going to be a tough challenge anyway, okay? Good luck. Thanks for your time, and hopefully I've not rambled too much. Good luck. Bye-bye.